let's start. I think it's a time. Hello, everybody. I'm Cristina Chumillas. I'm a designer and front-end developer at Timbra, a design and Drupal shop based in Barcelona. And you can find me as Sekrina on Drupal.org or IRC, or Chumillas on Twitter. First, we are going to check that statement that Mari Meeker made on 2008, saying that mobile was going to overtake fixed internet access by the year 2014. And it was something like that because actually last year in the States it was around 70% of traffic for mobiles, and I think in the UK it was around 66%, so something like that. But what actually happened is that mobile isn't killing the desktop. What it actually is happening is that users are having multi-device experiences. They start, for example, on the desktop, and then they follow on the mobile. For example, you search an address on the desktop, then you send it to your mobile, and then you get the directions to go to the place. So that's not exactly like that. And it was around 6 years ago when Ethan Marcotte named the responsive web design. And a lot of stuff has changed since then. A lot of processes, a lot of things have changed. So, for example, the processes have been evolving since then. For example, the content first and the mobile first are really a thing nowadays. Not everybody does that. Content first is having the main content, the most relevant content first on the website and keeping that in mind. And mobile first is thinking first on mobile. The first display, the first small display that the user is going to see, and then just work together with content first, and then you have the thing that has to be on the first place. Another thing that has changed since then is that we don't work, or we shouldn't work anymore with static compositions, Photoshop, PSD, PNGs. We shouldn't work with that anymore. Instead of that, we should use responsive prototypes. Why? Because the decisions should be taken on the browser, because at the end is where the user will consume your site. So you should decide on the browser. So you should go quickly to the browser and give prototypes to the customer, because there the customer will be able to decide if he wants that or not. Another thing that has changed is we don't work with lorem ipsum, with custom, with default content anymore, because everything works on design. All the lines for a teaser have 2 lines, all of them works together, and that's not the real life. You have a real content, and you have one teaser with only 1 line, the next one have 5 lines, and it's almost impossible to make a design work if it doesn't been on the design from the beginning. So we should use real content and design with extreme cases. And the last years, atomic design and components have been also a thing, a really important thing, because it has changed the way we design, the way we conceive the webs, because we shouldn't be thinking on pages anymore. We shouldn't give to the final client, we give them a page. Of course, we won't give them only a style guide, but we need to think on different components to reuse them all along the site. Another important thing is performance. And performance is really, really important on responsive web design, because actually it was what the detractors of responsive web design used against responsive, because they said that responsive wasn't performance. And actually, it was like that in some pages some years ago. but it wasn't fault of the fault wasn't about the responsive design. It was the implementation. It wasn't the technique. So when we talk about performance, we talk about user experience, because if your site is going to take more than 4 seconds to be loaded, probably around the 64% of smartphone users will just leave your page. They won't wait. And bad news is that the page average is increasing year after year. Only last year, it was about 16% of increasing of weight, and the year before it was 15. So it's increasing a lot. Nowadays, the average is around 2.2 megabytes, and that's a lot. What I really like about working on performance is having a budget for performance. To say, okay, my website will have around 1 megabyte, 2 megabytes, let's be realistic. So if this website, I really love it, try it, because it's performancebudget.io, it's really useful. And for example, if I want my site load in 2 seconds, let's say on a 3G, fast 3G, because not everybody have 4G, but let's say a fast website. How many megas or Ks do you think the website should have to be loaded in only 2 seconds? Any idea? No? No ideas? 200 Ks. Only 200 Ks on a 3G. It's science fiction. I don't know you, but in the last 4 years, I haven't had any website just with that. It's impossible. Just you to see that, having that, we should have around 125 images, Ks for images. It's like you won't have a huge hero image. It's impossible with 200 Ks. And 7 Ks for CSS. That's not too much. And let's remember that, 10 Ks for fonts. I will talk about that later. So when we talk about performance at this user experience, we talk about the perceived performance. And it will be the most critical metric, because for interactions, we say that 1 second, an interaction happens before 1 second, around 1 second. We perceived it at immediate. Between 1 second and 5 seconds is something that's okay. It's human interaction. Between 5 and 10 seconds, there's the limit span. You still have the user there. But more than 10 seconds, the user has gone. You don't have the user there anymore, or at least his attention. So what can we do if we have a 2 megabytes website and we only have 2 seconds? What can we do? The perceived performance is where it comes. Let's see, for example, you go to a bar, to a restaurant, and you order something. And you are waiting around 10 minutes until the food is there. So you are like that, just waiting, doing nothing. It will be a lot waiting 10 minutes. But what if on the time that you get your food, someone brings you your drinks and also bring some snacks? You're doing something on that time. So you perceive that 10 minutes in a completely different way. So that's a perceived performance. Let's see this example. I really like it because they really do it quite well. It's a Listapart website. I'm sure some of you will know it. And what they do is, well, at the beginning, there's the HTML call. The parsers goes there and reads the CSS, the jQuery and modernizer, that's some JS. And when the parser and the browser render all that stuff, something appears on the screen. This something is content. You can read the content, but let's see here that there's no fonts loaded. Not yet. So you are reading something, you can do something, you actually can read the content, but you don't have anything else. You don't have the logo, you don't have the fonts, you don't have anything else, just the main CSS and jQuery and Modernizer. So that's a really thing. You still are doing something. Then other images, other GIFs are downloaded. Then you have here the logo, the header image. And suddenly this text disappears. What's that? I will talk about this later, but it's a flash of invisible text. Because look here, fonts are being detected. So the browser says, I have to load the fonts. When I have the fonts, I show the fonts. And then other stuff is downloaded. So that's the perceived performance, and that's something that we can do. We can custom our themes or CSS or implementation to play with the perceived performance. Here I have a small demo with the same, a 3G connection on mobile with the same Listapart website. And let's see it. First is the connection, there's nothing here. Then there's the content, some GS, some images. The text disappears, and it's just going on everything on there, on its place. So you can start doing something before actually you have all the stuff from the website. So when we do responsive, we should keep that in mind. So some tips will be optimize your image files, concatenate your text files, your CSS, JavaScript, minify them, compress them, of course, and cache everything you can. So if you see that, Drupal core does all that stuff, but who builds websites only with Drupal core? No one. So there's always something that we can do to improve the implementation. So if we are doing our theme, we will have to structure and optimize our CSS. For doing that, we have the CSS methodologies, the object-oriented CSS, BEM, block element modifier. There's a lot of stuff around that, but the most important one for theming is the naming, block element modifiers, name the elements according to that. SMAX is more a way to structure your CSS. You have the layout, you have each component, you have the theme layer. So it's a good thing to follow to work on your themes. And why are they important? Because you reuse your CSS. If you reuse your CSS, you reduce your page size, and you increase the page rendering speed, so it's faster. You also make faster the rendering. What do I mean? If for example, you have the class box, class child, and the title inside. You have that, and you want to go to the title, and you will see, okay, the browser will find all the boxes, the last one, and then the title inside. Yeah? No. The thing is not that easy. The browser, what we'll do is we'll find all the titles on the page, then we'll find the box, the last box, and then it will be parsed, it will be rendered. So it's really, really important to have only one class for each element, because it will be faster for the rendering. Of course, these methodologies make your projects large scale ready. You can make huge projects. And it helps you to figure out what your designs are going to be made of. And it helps you getting started in a project because you know where the stuff will be and how it should work. And style guides. You know what are style guides, right? Okay, living style guides are just a living document of code that details all the elements of your site. Okay. from here, that's okay. But what happens if you go and change your CSS because something is changed? Then the style guide is outdated. And an outdated style guide is a completely useless tool. If you don't use it, you don't invest your time on that. But the first time you used to build that style guide, it's completely useless then also. So you must have living style guides if you have living style guides, because otherwise, they are useless. There are different ways to implement it, but the most important thing is that they give faster build times for new sections and pages, because you know where's everything, where you have to go to find the way of building something. It standardizes the CSS, it keeps it small, and the design consistency is easier to maintain because you always know where to go to see what's the correct title, the correct color, so it's easier. So they are really useful. If you don't use living style guides, you will end up with 50 shades of gray. Yeah, I've seen that on many projects or in many designs, and it's awful. So, sorry, wrong button. Yeah. No. Okay. Another thing that we need to have in mind is the difference between fixed pixels versus relative units. No? No. Okay, we have the pixels, the AMs and REMs. Usually 1 AM and 1 REM is 16 pixels. That's the default for all browsers, unless you define something else on your base theme. And no, okay, let's forget it. And the best one between them, of course, we are doing responsive, we don't use pixels anymore. Between AMs and REMs, we should use always, we should use REMs. Why? Because they are more reliable. Because imagine that you have a title inside the teaser, inside the sidebar, and you have 1.1 from the previous one on that 1.1 AM on the teaser and 1.1 AM on the title. If you don't know or you don't remember that you are working on AMs and you already have 1.1 AM on the previous element, on the father element, you will end up with a 19 font. But if you work with REMs, you don't have to care about that. So that's better always that you can work with REMs. Another thing that I love, because I just discovered them 1 year ago, and it was like, oh, where have you been? Is the viewport size units that for building hero images are super useful. And actually they have been, I think, for 4 years. Even Internet Explorer works like that, with that. But there's a but always with Internet Explorer. They don't support Vmax. But here we have an example for these viewport units. And another thing that is really important on responsive design is typography and working with responsive typography. How we decide which font size we should use. Okay, we know that on mobiles we need to have a smaller size, on TVs we need to have a bigger one, but why? Because we decide the font size depending on the user distance of the screen, not the device screen itself. Why? Because you read your mobile here, your laptop is here, and the TV is there. That's why the TV needs a bigger font than your mobile. That's the why, not because the device is smaller. So when we decide the size, it's because of that. Just a quick tip, when we decide the font size, we should be thinking about having between 14 and 40 characters per line. More than that is bad for the user, because if you have, for imagine, 100 characters, it will be hard for the user to jump to the next line, because it won't be easy to find the next one, because he don't know where is exactly the next one. So it should be between 40 and 80 characters. So what the font size fits there, that's the font size you need. As a general, an average, we would say that on mobiles we would use the 14 pixels and 16 for the desktops. Some facts. Do you remember the 200 CAS that we said before on 2 seconds? Okay, it's about 5% for fonts. That's 10 CAS. And here we have the Open Sans, the super used Open Sans font. The WOF, that is the modern, the best choice, it's 23 CAS. But that's a regular one. There's the Open Sans Italic, Open Sans Bold, and Open Sans Bold Italic. So just, it's impossible, 10 CAS. So do we really need fonts? Of course. All of them? No, I don't think so. So some tips about choosing web fonts formats is that always, if a browser is already reading some format, don't use more formats. I mean, for example, the WOF, everybody reads the Word. It's compatible with almost everything instead of Internet Explorer. But you can use EOT, the old EOT for Internet Explorer. If you already have that, don't use SVG. You don't need it. So keep the weight of your website and only use what you need. Do you remember the flash of invisible text we saw on the demo? Before of that, there was the flash of unstyled text. It was the browsers that displayed the default font from the system, but the font wasn't the same that you decided for your design. So suddenly, when the browser got the font, everything just moved. So the browser said, let's remove it. And when we detect that content is going to need a font, we just don't show the font. And became the void became there. So we have void, and none of them is the ideal. So some other stuff is going on. There are some ideas like picking a font that is really similar to your font, then adjusting it takes a little bit, but that's a work in progress and there's no any standard way. But the best way would be, if you can use system fonts, use them, because for example for text they are really good. Some examples for some ways for adding fonts to your websites will be the font face. It's powered by CSS, it's accessible. You don't need external plugins, but usually there are two big fonts and there's no common format. Another one will be fonts.com. You have a large selection, you have exclusive fonts like Helvetica Neue, but you have to pay. You have Google Fonts, that it's always only CSS, unless you want to use Web Font Loader, I think it's named. It's really accessible. It's really cached. That's what I really like from Google Fonts, because it caches the font. If you visit one site and then you go to another site that is also using Source Sans, you don't need to download the font again, because it's already in your browser. And of course, it's really, really easy to implement. And also we have Typekit. We have the largest font library there. It's accessible. It's also cached. It's easy to implement. And it has a premium service. You have to pay. And it's from Adobe. Some tips about typography. Always try to keep the readability of your fonts. Choose the correct font size depending on the container. Use less fonts. Do we really need them? Maybe you need fonts for your titles because they will see really good. But when you are on a 14 pixels font, there is no so huge difference between fonts. So do we really need them for the body? Sure, we need them. And use smaller font formats always that you can. And of course, because it will reduce the page weight. Sorry. So next step, images. They are really important on the traffic on the web. I really love this because that's evident. Come on, everybody knows JPEG is for photos, PNG is for logos or plain images, PNG 24 bytes is for transparencies. Yes, everybody knows. We know that, but not the customer. I remember once when we were the day before of the launch of a big website, and I was just checking the last check, and it was like, wait, 5 or 6 megabytes, and it was like, oh my God, what's going on? And I realized that we use the default content to create some content for the website and test everything. And the customer saw it and he said, great, I love that image. So he used that. But all the images were made on PNG and they were photos. And the only thing that happened is that I had to change it. But because I realized about that. But the customer didn't. So just try to keep it in mind. Some facts about images is that they are around 61% of the traffic on internet. The browser requests the images asynchronously, so that's great. But we usually load images too big for the device. So the aim should be to deliver the highest quality images supported, but nothing more, not a bigger image. So to do so, we have the scaled images. We have several options, but one of them is scaled images, where you will work. Yeah, we have the Azure set here, where we say which image should we use, the sizes, and the fallback image. And that's just for changing resolutions, not for changing the image, only just to scale the image. We also have adapted images. That's a picture that you know. That's for changing images. For example, that one is horizontal and that one is vertical, and they are completely different. Well, they are the same, but they have different proportions. So we have the picture that it's supported by everyone but Internet Explorer and Opera Mini. We have here the source where we define the different images, each for each resolution. Here we use media to say where should it be seen, and we have the fallback image here. That's picture. So on Drupal 8, we have responsive images, the old picture. In Core, it's disabled by default, but it's really quick to enable. And it supports, because breakpoints already does, different resolutions. And we also have lazy load, and Drupal 7 is on the picture module. Is a contrib on Drupal 8. And I have a quick example for creating responsive images. First, we just enable the module, then we go and create all the image styles that we are going to use on the responsive group. In that case, I'm just creating the teaser. Try to use to put the pixels on the name. It's really useful, otherwise you can end up with 50, 100 styles. Here I create the other ones just a little bit quickly. I would love to work that quickly. And we have the 3 that we need. We go to responsive images. We create a new group. We say the teaser. And I choose a group, a breakpoints group. That one is from Bartik, because I'm working on Bartik. I choose each image style for each image, for each breakpoint. And we also define a fallback image for Internet Explorer and Friends. And here we already have it. I prepared a view, a super quick view, an easy view, where we just add here the image. And we choose responsive format with the group teaser, and that it's linked to the content. I reorder it because it's nicer. And that's all, we have it. We go here, we have a list of teasers, and if we resize it, we actually have responsive images. So you see the difference between the proportions. So it's that easy now on Drupal 8. So it's really, really great. We are really lucky to have that on Drupal. We don't realize that sometimes, far, far away, some people have troubles with that. So, another thing that we have on Drupal 8 right now is the crop API. We have the image widget crop module where the user can choose exactly what part of the image wants for each image style. And we also have focal point that it's even easier. The user only chooses what's the most important part of the image and then automatically crops the image. Believe me, it's super easy to implement, and the user is like, oh, it's super easy. Drupal rocks. So if you can, use it, because by default on your websites, if you use responsive images, because it's super easy. And in the implementation, it's really easy. You just choose instead of scale and crop, you just choose in scale and crop focal point. And that's the only difference. So it's really useful. What else? Designer's creativity. There's always one more thing on design. So what if your designer, or me, I'm a designer also, decides that on mobile he only wants one apple? So responsive images doesn't work here. Yeah, so we need different images. What we usually do is we create, there's nothing still on Drupal 8 for that, or on Drupal 7. What we do is we create one field for each image, then we create the image style for each breakpoint, and then we prepare everything on Drupal 8, on Drupal 7 it was a pre-process hook. On Drupal 8 I think you really don't need to prepare it. It's a filter, but I'm not sure. I've done this only on Drupal 7. And you finally print it on a custom template. You write the picture stuff on the template, and then you have it. So it's a way to solve the designer's creativity. What I was saying before is that there are solutions that people need because they don't work on Drupal, with Drupal. So there's scaling based on there are solutions that scales based on the targeted end result, like responsive.io or other solutions. There are also solutions that scale based on the URL, Cloudinary and other places, and there are solutions that scale based on media queries. So there are some options out there. If you wanna use it, you can do it, but Drupal just works by default. SVGs. I will need a complete session for talking about that. But some of the most important thing about SVGs is that they are scaling. They are design control they have design control like interactivity and filters. They are future-proof. They are easy to make and to edit because they are code. And they are highly compressible. And you can manipulate with CSS and JavaScript unless you are working with Internet Explorer. So always, as you can, use SVGs. Don't use SVGs for photos, of course. But if you can use it, try to use them. Asynchronous loading. Doesn't work. What's the default behavior, for example, for JavaScript? There's a connection, the HTML, then the parser reads every line, and he found, for example, the CSS, after this, the first JavaScript, the second. But after it is rendered, the browser doesn't print anything. So we have a problem here, because we have to wait for that. There are some solutions out there, but it will be the default behavior. You place the script on the head just after the CSS. But we have the async property that will tell to the browser that it has to be, he has to wait. He doesn't have to wait for that. It's good because while the JavaScript file is loading, the parsing of the document can continue. The JavaScript execution no longer has to wait. But you can't guarantee the order of the JavaScript execution. The problem is that you remember that on the example that I said from Alista part, there was the HTML, the CSS, jQuery, and Modernizer. Because if you need something from there, you need to be sure they are loaded first. There's another option, that's a defer, that solves that a little bit. It's just adding the property defer there. It deferred the scripts, the deferred scripts are executed only when the HTML has been parsed. The deferred scripts will execute only in order that they appear, but it has the potential to interfere with the rendering of the page, so it's a little bit dangerous. And of course, the asynchronous has priority, so just keep that in mind. That's how the asynchronous loading could work. The most common options will be just having the typical JavaScript on the head of your page, or adding to that JavaScript these properties. You could also add the JavaScript here. And of course, you can add the JavaScript at the bottom of the body. Those are the most common options. Proxy-based browsers. We always forget them because, come on, who uses Opera Mini? Again, sorry. Who uses Opera Mini? 250 million at least uses them. Okay, mainly on India, Indonesia, and that countries. Maybe they are not our target, but they are hard users of that. So a lot of people use them. So we should keep this kind of browser, especially Opera Mini, in mind. Why? How these browsers works. They reduce the language, the data that the browser is going to use, compressing the resources on a proxy server between the site and the user. There's a proxy server, and then sends to the client just a compressed version and parsed version of the website. To work with them, we should try to use SVG rather than econ fonts. I don't know if you use econ fonts anymore, but try to use SVGs instead of that. They are super cool, but they have a lot of troubles. not only on Opera Mini, but on other browsers. Always that you can style on your HTML with CSS, not JavaScript. Test your site without JavaScript, because sometimes the JavaScript just disappears. Of course, that's make your site performant, because they use Opera Mini because they want to use less data. So making it performant is better. And that is obvious, but test on Opera Mini, it's not that difficult to do, and it can help a lot of people. So I keep trying using that. Progressive enhancement. That's a really important thing, because it helps a lot this kind of user that use this kind of browser. The idea is using the basic content and the basic functionality for this kind of browsers like Opera Mini, and then serve an enhanced version for advanced browser or the ones that have more bandwidth to use. And beyond the mouse, when we test, when we develop, we work with our mouse, but there are touch events and keyboard events. We don't have the mouse on the smartphone, of course. So some tips to work with that is save the hover for shortcuts. Of course, the hover sometimes is really, really useful, but if you make, for example, your navigation with the hover, people with smartphones will have a lot of troubles. Most of the operating systems have been developing different ways, because the hover is 2 clicks on iOS, for example. But to be safe, try to avoid the hover only for other kind of stuff. For example, a different image, a different color, so don't use it for important thing. So be accessible in browser where a mouse pointer may not exist. And don't assume that the touch will be used, but design as it will be. So don't design your navigation with hover. Another thing is keep in touch. What does it mean? That if you put the cursor on the side of your finger, they are completely different. So when you design a button for a smartphone, for a mobile, it should be bigger. For the finger, it should be 57. And for the thumb, it's even bigger, because you need more space. But not only for that, because not only because the space you need for the finger, but also because you need to have some safe space around it. And another just quick tip is don't override system defaults. If the system uses some gesture to move to another page or to go back on the history of your browser, don't override it, because you will annoy the user. So try to avoid it. And the last point is responsive design patterns. Patterns are really, really important, because we really don't need to invent the wheel on each website we design. There are things that are super cool, but the user needs to learn it. So the less things the user needs to learn on your site, more comfortable he will be there. So he will stay there for more time. That's really good, for example, for commerce. Don't invent anything, because people need to feel safe, needs to understand everything on the first moment. So design patterns are recurrent solutions that solve common design problems. For example, navigation patterns. We have the typical off-site navigation like Facebook. That applies to menus, for tabs, for example, for breadcrumbs, for carousels, pagination. Always use a pattern if you can, because the user will remember it. For example, for forms, always as you can use a pattern, because the user it will be faster for the user. for dealing with data, for example, for slideshows, for tables, for autocompletes, for search things, always that you can try to use patterns for that also. For shopping, for onboarding, for social. Then we have the progressive disclosure. That's a way of, what it does is showing you the most normal thing, the most important thing, the thing that most users do on the first place. For example, here you have the email, so you click and you go to the mail. But if you want to do more stuff, you have to move on right or on left, and you have some hidden options. So only show the main option, and then display, show the other options only if the user needs them. And well, some conclusions about responsive nowadays. Keep adapting your Webflow. It's really good to get new things on your Webflow, on your workflow. Keeping weight. Take the most of new technologies because they can help you to make everything faster. Keep the user in mind, please. At the end, he will suffer your website, so think on them. And be prepared for the uncertain. We don't know how the browsers will work in 5 years, and probably the website will be still there. And the last one, keep evolving, because the website is doing that all the time. So that's all. Thank you. One more thing, there are the contribution sprints. They ask us to put that information here, and a little bit of spam. There's the Frontend United on Greece next year. Greece is amazing on Athens, so if you want to go there, just remember that it's there. And evaluate the session if you can. Thanks. Any questions?